Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Tony from Drinks and Opinions. Sorry about the 15-second offset there. Thanks for joining again, and those that'll watch later. Give me a second. I got to mute this. I forgot to do that. There we go. But thanks for everybody joining. I'd like to welcome my guest, the Brewing Sailor. We're going to be discussing beer, some non-alcoholic beer, which he's very passionate about. I will stop there. I will let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself. Go ahead, man.
All right, thanks, Tony. Yes, my name is Brendan Smith. I am the Brewing Sailor. Spent 7 years in the Navy, hence the sailor part, and I spent the last 5 years as a professional brewer, hence the brewing part. I was a home brewer for 10 years before that, and I've been a beer nerd since high school, so I love good beer. Recently started reviewing non-alcoholic beers on my channel. Because the market is exploding, but also for a very personal reason. About a year, just over 14 months ago, I guess, I had a really bad car crash. I had a DUI. I was very lucky to be alive. I'm even more grateful that I didn't hurt anybody else. And because of that, I had to take a serious look at how I was living my life and decided to switch to non-alcoholic beer before the state of Texas mandated that I couldn't drink, which that'll go away in March 2024. But even then, I don't think I'll ever go back to drinking the amount I used to, just because it was too much for my own health, let alone anything else. And besides, if I ever got another DUI, my wife would kill me. And last time I checked, death is detrimental to one's health. So we're going to stay away from that. I'm probably going to be, in the future, I'll probably stay about 80 to 90% non-alcoholic beer because the non-alcoholic beer really is getting that good. It's gotten to the point where it's the beer that I love, not necessarily the booze. And so if I can have as much beer as I want and wake up the next morning feeling right as rain, well, that's a beautiful thing. Hence the name of the show, Hangover-Free Reviews.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I know. Like my first non-alcoholic was actually O'Doul's of all things.
And I think everybody's was.
Everybody, exactly.
Even when we ordered it by accident because we didn't realize it was non-alcoholic.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but I find a lot of non-alcoholics. Well, I'm not talking about current, but like past non-alcoholic beers, just were not good. Mm-hmm. The flavor was just always off. It's almost like they couldn't nail it, or they were just being cheap with it. I don't know which.
A little bit of both, actually. Your instincts aren't off. A little bit of both. Sometimes people were cheap with it. Other times, the technology wasn't quite there. The technology to remove alcohol from a completed beer has gotten to the point where the only thing you'll notice the difference. So there are a lot of different ways to make non-alcoholic beer, but the two best ways to do it revolve around either vacuum distillation, which is running a beer through a vacuum. And in a vacuum, the boiling point of alcohol drops to 70 degrees. So you can literally boil off all the alcohol without affecting the flavor or the aroma of the beer by raising the temperature to the normal boiling point of alcohol, which is 171. That would lead to 170 to 173, depending on your alcohol, but that's getting a little technical. The point being is when you get the beer that warm, you start to add cooked flavors to it. It really kind of messes with the beer. So now that you can do it in a vacuum, you don't have that problem. The other way to do it is through reverse osmosis, which you're filtering, at pressure, you're forcing the beer through these very tiny filters and using water, and you're gently removing the alcohol from the solution at a very low temperature. And this produces, either one of these will produce a non-alcoholic beer, which is going to taste very similar to the original beer that was brewed, minus a little body because you've taken the alcohol out. For example, a couple of great examples of big names are Guinness Zero and Stella Liberté, which is the Stella Artois 0.0 beer. And those beers taste remarkably similar to their alcoholic counterparts, just a little bit thinner because they don't have that extra alcohol in there.
Yeah, because that was always the big thing. And I've tried them in the past, and just the flavor always seemed off. But I think it's good that they're starting to do more advancements with the flavor of non-alcoholic beer.
Oh, sure.
I like me, I've cut back on my drinking a lot. Mm-hmm. Because sleeping problems for me. Being a firefighter. So yeah, I know the DUI thing. I've been on them, so I understand. Yep. But somebody that drank too much, I also understand. Now, I never had a DUI myself. Because my wife had just beat the living tar out of me.
Trust me, if I wasn't already in the state I was when I came home that night, she would have.
Yeah, but I think it's good that they are coming out with better non-alcoholic beers, especially if somebody, let's say, is a designated driver, for example.
100%.
You know, they could have that non-alcoholic beer. Granted, if they get pulled over, they're going to have to blow. It's going to happen because they're still going to have to smell. But it's good for them because they can still participate without actually having the alcohol in it. And I think that's an excellent thing.
And to your point, in a couple of weeks, so I grew up where I got my start in beer, as I was telling you before the show, was in Irish pubs, specifically an Irish pub in Providence, Rhode Island called Patrick's Pub. And we would go and have some Guinness with my family, and we'd watch the ball game or listen to the Irish music that was playing, whatever the entertainment was that day. But in a couple of weeks, my local Irish pub here in McKinney, Texas, the Celt, great place, great food, great booze, the whole 9 yards. It's one of the best Irish pubs you'll ever go to. They are having Derek Warfield and the Young Wolf Tones come in to start off the St. Patrick's Day season, and I'm going to go. And I'm going to go all of the actual Irish community. I'm talking not just people who say they're Irish one day out of the year, but people who live in North Texas that are literally from Ireland. They will be there. And, normally everybody's pounding Guinness or Irish whiskey. Well, I didn't go last year for obvious reasons. This year I'm going because Stan, the owner of the Celt, he carries Guinness Zero. So I can sit there and I can have my Guinness Zero, and it looks and smells and tastes just like regular Guinness, and I don't have to explain to everybody why I'm not drinking alcohol.
Yeah, nobody's going to notice.
Mm-hmm. So it's fantastic. And if you just want a DD, well, then you have that choice too. Or even if you decide, hey, I just want to moderate my alcohol intake, I'm going to have 1 or 2 Guinness early in the night, but for the next 4 hours, I'm going to drink nothing but Guinness Zero. And then by the time I get in the car, if I do have to blow, I'm going to blow 000 because I haven't had alcohol in 4 hours.
And I think that's actually a really good thing. I got a question with non-alcoholic beer. What is the difference in making non-alcoholic beer versus alcoholic beer? Obviously, there are differences, but what are they?
Sure. So it depends on how you're making non-alcoholic beer. So brewing non-alcoholic beer, there are 2 main methods. There's either going to be arrested fermentation, and that's where you're stopping alcohol from being produced, or alcohol removal. And in the case of alcohol removal, the brewing method is exactly the same until the beer is finished. You're going to brew a regular beer. So I would brew it just like I normally was. I'd mill my grains. I'd mash them in with hot water. I'd let it sit for an hour. I would drain off that liquid that we call wort, which is unfermented beer, W-O-R-T, pronounced with an E, W-E-R-T, so wort. We'd filter that off into or drain that off into the brew kettle. We do a process called sparging, which is you use a shower of hot water to rinse those grains free of residual sugars. And then once you have the full amount that you need for your boil, then you bring that up to a boil. You add your hops, you add any other ancillary ingredients that you want to eat, add during the boil. And after an hour to an hour and a half boil, depending on the type of beer you're making, you move it to your fermenter and you cool it down as fast as possible because you want to get it from the boil temperature to the yeast pitching temperature as quickly as possible because you don't want to cook your yeast. So once you get it down to about 70 degrees, you can pitch your yeast and you let it sit for a week. Okay. So and then during that time, yeast is eating sugar, it's peeing alcohol and farting CO2. Once that's completed, some people just transfer it right to a keg. Depending on the style, I might transfer it to a secondary fermenter to clear it up, add some what we call fining material to make it clear. Like if I want to make a crystal clear lager, I'm going to add a product called BioFine, and that's going to clear up the beer. And then after it's cold and clear, I'm going to then transfer it to my keg, and we want it cold before we transfer it to the keg so it'll accept the CO2 faster. So now you've made beer, okay? In alcohol removal, this is the stage where you would either then run it through reverse osmosis or vacuum distillation. Now, home brewers can't do that because those machines are rather large, kind of hard to fit in your garage, number one. Well, you probably could fit it in your garage, but you might seriously piss off your wife if you tried. Or your husband if you're a female brewer, because there's some great female brewers out there. I know a few who have won GABF gold medals. They're just rock star ladies out there in the brewing industry. But you really can't afford to do that at home. These machines are extremely expensive and they're meant for professional brewers. What you can do at home is you can do the boil off method. Now, you can either take your finished beer and put it back into a sanitized pot and put it on your stovetop, and you get it to 170 degrees and you boil it off for an hour, and that should give you a non-alcoholic beer. And what we mean by non-alcoholic would be less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. So that's non-alcoholic. Anything, if you see something that's labeled AF, that's alcohol free. That means there is no discernible trace of alcohol. It's 0.0. And it is a legal distinction. Now you can boil it off on the stove. You could use your boil kettle on if you have a brewing rig with a burner, or you do what my friends and I would do in that situation. We have what's called a RIM system, recycled infused mash system. And basically what this does is it sucks the beer out the bottom of the mash tun, recycles it through the wort to clear it up. You're using the grain bed, recycles through the wort through the grain bed, I should say. And what you're doing is you're using that big, thick grain bed to act as its own filter. But while it's going through that cycling, it goes through a tube that has an electronic heating element, and you can control the temperature of the wort. So you have precise control over how warm or how cold it is. You could then use that to go to 171 degrees, keep it there for half an hour, and you have precise control. You know it stays at that temperature. Really nifty system. The other problem with that is you're still cooking the beer up to 170 degrees. So that's the only way homebrewers can do alcohol removal. What I'm actually going to be attempting, and I'll be documenting on my YouTube channel in a couple of weeks, about a month actually. I think March 25th is our brew day, so a little about 2 months actually. Our brew day for this, I think, is going to be March 25th. We are going to do not an arrested fermentation, but it's alcohol prevention. And so how we're going to do a very small grain bill. We're going to mash it extremely warm. Normally when you mash beer, you mash the grains to get your wort. You do it at about 151 degrees, 152 degrees. And this gets really technical, but basically what you're doing is when you mash it a little colder than 150 degrees, you get these enzymes called beta amylase, and they're really simple sugars. The yeast eat the crap out of them. When you mash hotter than 152 degrees, you get alpha amylase, which are more complex sugar chains, which are harder for the yeast to eat. So we don't want any beta amylase. We want all alpha amylase because we want more body. We want this thing harder to eat. So we're going to mash all the way up to 176. And that's actually going to produce something called dextrins, which will also help that mouthfeel. And then when we boil it, we're only boiling for 30 minutes instead of 60 or 90 because we don't want to cook off too much and condense our wort and make it higher gravity than we want to. We don't want any chance a lot of alcohol in this. Then we're going to use a brewer's yeast, which is a relatively new designer yeast, which are known as malto-negative yeasts. And what does that mean? Well, it basically just means it won't ferment about 80% of the available sugars. So normally, brewer's yeast ferment about 70 to 80% of the sugars. In this case, we're doing the opposite. We're only fermenting about 20% of the available sugars. And this should net us a beer that comes in around right about 0.5% alcohol. And we are going to use a wide range of grains to provide flavor. And then we're also going to hop the holy hell out of it. So this is going to be an IPA. And hopefully it'll come out tasting great. And if it does, I'll report that. And if it doesn't, well, the look will be all over my face.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Real quick, if you don't mind. I know there is a level of science involved with brewing beer, especially, but just in general. Now, what would be, if there are any differences between brewing beer, let's say just a regular home brewer or somebody that does it as a craft beer? We'll just use those two instead of like the big brand ones. We'll just leave it to those.
It really depends on the level of the home brewer. Because what I do at home is very much a miniaturized version of what I used to do at the brewery. We have an all grain system where we use 100% milled grains. So we create our beer recipe. There's a program out there called Beersmith. And so say you want to make a beer that's called, let's say you're making a German Oktoberfest style, right? A Märzen. So you want it to be that kind of nice, like copper color. You put in your grains, you tell it what grains you want to use, and it's going to tell you whether or not it falls within the acceptable style for that beer. So it's all the mathematic that goes involved with the different colors because the grains are roasted at different temperatures and they impart different colors. Then you add your hops, and you're going to. So we're making a German Märzen. So you'd want German hops, what we call noble hops. So you're looking for Hallertauer or Saaz or hops like that. So you're going to put those in there, and you want a German lager yeast, okay? Which now we're going to have to ferment cold because we're doing a lager. And lagers ferment at a colder temperature than ales. Ales like to ferment about 65 to 70 degrees. Lagers 55 degrees. So we're going to keep that in our beer fridge the whole time. So it's very much a miniaturized version of what pro brewers do. The scale of which and the complexity of which between that, the difference between what I'm doing home brewing and what I would do at the pro brewing is a lot less than, and there are differences, but they're tiny and it's detail oriented, to where a newbie in the home brewing industry, where I was 10, 15 years ago, and you're doing what are called, God, now it's been so long since I've done them. Your big extract brews. So basically what you're doing, extract brewing, you just basically take the mash out of it altogether. You don't have to mill grain. You don't have to, do the mash. You don't have to do the sparge that I mentioned earlier. You have this liquid malt extract. So that's already been done for you. And you have in the cans. All you have to do is get your water that you need to boil, bring it to a boil, and add the liquid malt extract. Okay. And so it takes that whole step out of it. You can literally brew a beer on your kitchen stove if you wanted to. It's a very simple process. It's literally cooked by numbers. And the big thing that new brewers miss is sanitization. You mentioned how there's a lot of science in brewing, and there is. It's 100%. But I like to tell people that brewing is 20% science, 20% artistry, and about 60% janitorial work. On my LinkedIn page, it says brewer, cellarman, and ninja of the custodial arts. If you can't sanitize something that's not clean, so you got to clean before you sanitize. And if your equipment post boil, so anything that touches the beer after the boil, if it's not cleaned and sanitized, you're going to infect your beer, and it's going to either come out tasting sour if you got a lactobacillus infection, which is a bacteria, or if you get a pediococcus infection, you're going to come out with snotty beer. Like, I don't know if you saw last summer, there were Coors, was it Coors? I think it was Coors, Keystone, like a couple of, it was Keystone, I know, I forget who owns Keystone. I think it's Coors. But I think Coors Light and Keystone had beers where people were pouring them out and it looked like snot coming out of the can. They got a pediococcus infection. They had to recall a whole bunch of beer. It's not going to hurt you. It's just nasty. And, lactobacillus isn't going to hurt you. It just sours the beer. It'll come out tasting sour. And in some cases, brewers use lactobacillus to create sour beers. Those are called kettle sours. And it sometimes can be desirable. But if you're drinking a milk stout and it tastes, which is supposed to be super sweet and chocolatey, and you taste sour, well, that's not what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So really, it depends on your level of, in short, I know that was a whole long rambling answer, but in short, it depends on how into brewing you are, as how close it is to what a pro brewer does. The big difference between a home brewer and pro brewer is scale. To give you an example, when we brew, at most, we're brewing 15 gallons of one beer at a time. That's one half barrel keg. Okay, we will split it into 3 slim kegs. And that's our rice lager. We call it Rice Krispie Boy. The most we'll make out of that is 15 gallons at a time because that's all we can do on our system. When I was the head brewer at a small brew pub, we would brew, I would get 8 half barrel kegs out of a batch, out of a very small, because we were a small 3-barrel system and you have some equipment loss, but I would get about 8 kegs out of a batch versus 1. So, and then when I was working at Franconia Brewing Company in McKinney, we worked on a 25-barrel system. So you're looking at about 50 kegs out of every batch. And those are relatively small breweries. Now you're talking about, if you go to Shinerbach down in Texas, if you go to, and Shiner's not even big as, say, Budweiser. But if you go to Shinerbach, their fermentation tanks are between 400 barrels and 1,400 barrels. And to give you an idea, folks, a barrel equals 31 gallons. So you times 1,400 times 31, and you'll figure out how many gallons of beer they have in that tank. They're gargantuan.
I got a question. When it comes to non-alcoholic beer, has the demand for that been increasing over the years? And if so, when did the big increase really probably start? Or could you?
We're in the middle. We're in the middle of it, actually.
Middle of it. Okay.
Yes. So to give you an idea, the 800-pound gorilla in the non-alcoholic world is Athletic Brewing Company. They are bi-coastal. They started in Stamford, Connecticut, and they now also have a brewery in California. They recently got a $50 million investment from Keurig Dr. Pepper. And Keurig Dr. Pepper bought themselves a seat on the board of directors of Athletic. They are I like to call them the Samuel Adams of the craft beer world. They're everywhere. They're reasonably priced. They make a quality, consistent product, but they're almost also a victim of their own success because they're kind of too big to be cool now. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people in the world are like, well, they're not really even craft anymore because they're so big. I'm just going to grab myself another beer out of my beer fridge, which is right here. So excuse me.
Oh, you're perfect fine. That's why we call it Drinks and Opinions. We all have our opinions and we all drink. Non-alcoholic or alcoholic.
Well, and my Christmas present for my wife for all my beer reviews was a mini fridge that goes right next to my computer desk. It's a beautiful thing.
My buddy got a new mini fridge recently. I gave him one my grandma passed. He ended up getting one. His wife works at a hospital, and it used to be a blood sample refrigerator.
Nice.
You know how cold that thing gets way colder than your standard mini fridge.
Oh, I bet.
He's like, blood samples. I'm like, great. I'm going to get tetanus.
So this is a new beer that just hit my Total Wine. It's called So Beer. It's a pretty decent little light lager. They have an American light lager, and they have an American light lager with grapefruit. I didn't try the grapefruit one. I only bought the 1 6-pack. When I buy a new beer when I start with a new brewery, I like to start with the lightest, crispiest beer I can. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I do that is because you can't hide anything in a crispy beer. In a beer that's light, there's no big hop presence. There's no big malt presence. You'll
taste any difference in
exactly. So if you can brew me a good crispy boy, I'll drink anything you put in front of me. But if you can't brew me a good crispy boy, then I don't have time for anything else you have on your menu.
I do the same thing. Like I like to go to like restaurants that do a lot of their own brewery. You know, I guess, how would that be? Would that be like microbrewing or
they call it a brew pub.
Brew pub, yeah.
And they would all fall under craft brewing, but and so you see how I pour that beer nice and hard with that big head? I know a lot of people don't like to have a big head, and let me tell you why you should, folks. Because in a can of beer, there is more CO2 than is needed to keep the beer fresh or to keep the beer carbonated. It's there to keep the beer fresh. And if you don't crack it out of the solution and get a nice big head, it's going to end up in your belly, and you end up bloated and belching all the time. So that's number one. Number two, the other reason you want a nice big head on is because the head is a wonderful conveyor of the smells of the beer to your nose. And with your olfactory senses and your sense of taste being so closely linked, the better you can smell something, the better it will taste. So you always want to have that nice big head there. Take a good whiff of the beer. And this is going to have a very grainy smell to it, very cereal-like smell to it because it's a light lager. There's not a lot of hops in there to give that floral, spicy, or citrusy aroma. There's not a lot of it's a very clean fermenting yeast, so you don't get a lot of flavors from the yeast. So what you're going to have there is going to be the grain. And this is going to be nice and bready and cereal notes. And that's all there. It may touch of sweetness if they've used some type of adjunct, whether a lot of times in Mexican lager, they're going to use corn. In Budweiser, for example, they use rice. So,
yeah, I live near Budweiser where I live. So, I got a question from a listener, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Lemon Pie has asked, "What is the actual store availability of non-alcoholic beers?"
That's a great question. It really depends where you are, but it's growing. I know at Total Wine. If you go into their craft beer section, they now have 3 dedicated shelves to non-alcoholic beers. The nice thing about non-alcoholic beer, though, is if there's a brewery you want to try and they don't distribute to your area, unlike alcoholic beer, they can ship it directly to you because there's no alcohol in it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yes. So now shipping can be pricey. Some breweries, like Two Roots Brewing Company, if you buy 2 or more 6-packs, they will waive shipping, which is nice. So they're one of my favorite breweries to order from because I order 3 or 4 6-packs and no shipping, and it's lovely. But the availability is expanding, and that goes to your previous question, actually, because over the last, if we look at athletics growth, they're been about for 5 years now. They've been in business. They've gone from 700 barrels to 1,500 barrels to 30,000 barrels, and this year in 2023 they are projected to brew over 100,000 barrels. So wow. You can see just from them the expansion. Now you look at the expansion and growth of actual just non-alcoholic focused breweries. There's 1820 Brewery in Maine, Rationale Brewing, my sponsors out in California. You've got breweries popping up. Rick's Near Beer down in Austin, Texas is an NA dedicated brewery. So you got a lot of these popping up. And then there are breweries who brew alcoholic beer who are jumping on the chain. And not just the big ones like we've already mentioned, like Heineken, Stella, Guinness, Budweiser, Coors, Miller, but smaller craft breweries like Woodland Farms up in Maine. And Woodland Farms does phenomenal things with non-alcoholic beer. Their Belgian White and their West Coast IPA are absolutely stellar. I love them. You can check out my reviews on them. I just did them a couple weeks ago. Although I apologize for the audio on the White. Our nice mics, they crapped out halfway through. We didn't realize it till post-production. And all we had to work with was the omnidirectional mic that picked up every noise in the bar. God bless my poor wife. She spent hours getting it to where the audio to where it is today. So even if you think that's bad, imagine where it was before she worked her magic. Anyway, the struggles of life on YouTube, as you well know.
I'm figuring it out. I know all too well. Yeah, that's always been a big thing. Is I've even known a lot of people. Whether people that have drinking problems or people that have been designated drivers. Like even in my case, if I've been a designated driver, which I don't have a problem doing. Mm-hmm. I enjoy adult beverage like anybody else, but if I'm driving, that's always been the problem I've found is the lack of non-alcoholic beers for people. It's always been O'Doul's for the most part. That's really all we
right.
had.
And right now, if you go to like a big box store, and what I mean by big box store, like if you go to a national chain, like even a national chain, which is itself a brewery, like BJ's Brewhouse. I was at BJ's yesterday for lunch with my wife, and I asked the server, "Do you have any non-alcoholic options?" And she comes back, she says, "Yes, we have Heineken Zero." And I went, Because, so here's the thing with Heineken Zero. I'm not going to give them too much shit because if you like Heineken, you will love Heineken Zero. They did a phenomenal job of making it taste exactly like the original. The only problem is I hate Heineken with a passion. It is one of my least favorite macro. I will drink, I can't stand AB InBev as a company. I think they're predatory. I think they're just terrible for the industry. But as brewers, the people who brew for AB InBev are phenomenal brewers. The fact that you can brew a Budweiser at 6 different breweries across the United States, and whether you're drinking a Budweiser in Oregon or a Budweiser in Florida, and it's the same beer, that level of consistency is a gold standard in the industry. Consistency is king in the beer industry. Consistency is king. So I absolutely respect the brewers at AB InBev. I just hate the giant conglomerate they work for. Yeah. But I will.
Did you hear they're being sued?
I'm
Yuengling. Yuengling. We're actually getting Yuengling in Missouri.
Right.
It starts Monday, and Yuengling's suing them. Something with I don't remember what it was. Something either with their trademark or something like that. That AB InBev, because before they got bought by InBev, they were way better. But that's a different point. Me being a St. Louis and. Yeah. They're apparently getting sued. Something with copyright infringement, and they were trying to hose them over. Basically, they've been trying to keep them out of here for years.
You tell me that InBev's getting sued, and I'm going to be like, oh, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's about even for St. Louisans. We're all like, what they do now.
Yeah,
that's how we all look at it now.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, InBev really, when they bought Budweiser, we could do a whole show just on InBev's purchase of Budweiser and how they really broke the social contract that the company of Budweiser had with the city of St. Louis. Back when we were growing up, and we were both in our teens and whatnot. If a charity in St. Louis needed beer for a charity event, all they had to do is call Budweiser's public affairs people and say, "Hey, can you spare a couple kegs?" Or even if they said, "Can you spare a case?" InBev would show, or not InBev, but Budweiser would show up with a keg. They're like, "You're fine, take it. It's for charity, no problem." They employed a huge portion of the city. The first thing they did was come in, shut off the taps to the charities, and lay off a whole bunch of brewers. So, of course, St. Louis has very harsh feelings towards InBev. I understand that 100%. And actually, they screwed that up so badly, did InBev, that they really gave rise to the craft beer movement in St. Louis, because now you had all these people that worked in the brewing industry that were without a job. So what are they going to do? Well, they went and made their own breweries.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the founders, or one of the sons that was one of the Bushes, started Craft Tig after that whole buyout thing. And now I don't know if it's still around or not, but now he's starting a whole new one. I think it's going to be more craft related, because it's the thing. It's kind of it's really becoming very popular. It's like you go to Busch Stadium. All they used to sell was Bud Light, Budweiser products.
But let me get back
now they don't.
Let me get back to the viewer's question real quick, because I just wanted to say, so in that same article where the Keurig purchase of Athletic was announced, Brewbound, a beer website, they put out there that there is going to be a big spring reset at the retailers, where you're going to see more and more craft beer options, not just the amount of breweries that are available on the store shelves, but the amount of options from those breweries. So coming spring of this year, and it's really already started to happen. Like I saw this guy yesterday. This was, if I can get it to work with my camera in my background. Gotcha. So beer. This is the first time I didn't even heard of these. And normally I hear about a beer before I see it, long before I see it on the shelves. So for the fact just to show up on the shelf, that's a sign that reset is happening. Also, at smaller venues that are more local venues, at your bigger places like BJ's, like Applebee's, like Chili's, they're going to have either O'Doul's, Bud Zero, Heineken, Stella, something like that, Stella Liberty. They're going to have one of those big options, but because they have to have the same thing everywhere throughout the country, and those are the only things. You might get lucky and see Athletic. I know Buffalo Wild Wings is carrying Athletic beer, so. That is changing a little bit. But at your local restaurants, especially if you have craft beer focused places like the growler shops here in this industry, in Dallas, in our area, the craft and growlers started carrying a couple NA options. Guitars and Growlers has a few NA options. The Bearded Monk in Denton, Texas, where I film a lot of my episodes, the owner there, Ben Easley, is a huge supporter of the NA community, and he has a vast array of NA options.
I've heard of that, actually.
And so, yeah, and there's a couple other restaurants, like I mentioned. The Celt carries Guinness Zero. I know for a fact that Harvest McKinney, which is a great farm-to-table restaurant that I take my wife to on occasion, they carry Beck's Zero. So we are seeing more and more of it coming into the consciousness, and not only on the beer side, which I talk mostly about beer because that's what I am. I'm a brewer. But on the wine and spirit side, there also is a big push for non-alcoholic wine and spirits. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing a special called Hangover-Free Cocktails once a month, where we look at some non-alcoholic spirits. I'm not going to review them the same way because I can't speak as intelligently to how they're created. But it's just going to be more about, hey, I like this one or I don't like this one. And
the first one, bases.
Right. And the first one we're going to do is I've got 3 NA bourbons. I've got Liar's American Malt, Kentucky 74, and Free Spirit Spirit of Bourbon. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a non-alcoholic old-fashioned with all 3. And I'm going to take a blind taste test and tell you which one I like best.
Yeah, actually, I'll watch that definitely. Now I got another question. Kind of always wondered, what would you say are some of the biggest hurdles for the non-alcoholic craft beer industry, just in general, if there are any?
Well, number one, the biggest hurdle to getting into business is going to be initial expense. It costs a lot of money to open a brewery, right? And then if you want to do it really well, I think you need to be using either vacuum distillation or reverse osmosis or some combination of arrested fermentation with those. The problem with arrested fermentation is you can run into some real issues with off flavors being created depending on how you do it. So you really need to, and I know a lot of brewers are trying to do it. I've just noticed that almost without fail, all of the best non-alcoholic beers I've tried have used the alcohol removal process. So that alcohol removal process is expensive. And then, the initial setup, like for example, a vacuum distillation machine can cost upwards of $1 million. Now, yeah, on top of, especially one that can handle the actual volume that you want to deal with in order to be profitable as a business. Then on top of that, because there is no alcohol in the beer, alcohol is a natural preservative, right?
Yeah.
When you remove that preservative, now you have to pasteurize the beer to extend its life, because you don't want any microorganisms growing in the beer. As a matter of fact, I won't mention the brewery because I don't want to just throw them under the bus. And I've already mentioned them. I've already messaged them privately. They're like, hey, what are you guys doing here? I found a beer the other day that had exploded at Total Wine because,
wow,
yeah, something was still in there and something that was living, and the yeast could eat it. So the yeast ate it. And when yeast eat things, one of the byproducts is CO2. And you can only have so much pressure in a can before it finally goes pop. And it looked like almost the entire lid had been ripped off. It
almost sounds like if you saw like a canned food, kind of same principle, where if they'll blow up, and I've seen that where they just
same principle.
Open. Okay, thank you. I got a question with the pasteurization. Sorry, real quick.
Sure.
Was that like the same way is this kind of similar to the way they do it with like milk? Is it the same process, or is there some difference with that?
It's similar. So pasteurization is just simply heating the product up to the point where you do it quickly so you don't damage the product itself, but you heat it up to the point where you kill any microorganisms that might be inside it. And there's two different ways to do it. There's flash pasteurization, which in brewing happens before the filter, and then there's tunnel pasteurization, which happens after the filter and is generally the more preferred method. However, it's also the more expensive method. And once again, a tunnel pasteurization machine can cost up of $1 million. So if you're doing vacuum distillation with tunnel pasteurization, you're making fantastic craft beer. You're also $2 million in on top of whatever the brewery costs you to get going. So like I said, the biggest hurdle is initial cost, and undercapitalization will kill a business. If you don't have enough money, let me put it this way. If you open up a business with enough money to run your business for 1 year, you're going to go out of business in 13 months. You have to have 5 years worth of operating capital to open that business, because you're not going to make money for the first 2-3 years.
Quick question. So basically, I'm sorry,
no, it's fine.
I got ADD, so bear with me.
That's okay.
So basically, when it comes to the capital for starting a brewery, because all the equipment, everything you're going to need. So let's say if so basically, if you're projecting for 2 years initially, let's say if a place goes, hey, this 2 years, this is what we're going to need. You would be best, say, if instead of 2 years, doing like 6 or 8 years ahead of time, just advanced thinking, advanced preparation, financial,
100%.
all that.
100%.
Okay.
I would plan it. Look, and I will be opening a brewery eventually, probably about 6 or 7 years once my friend's kids graduate college, and they're all done. He and our retirement is basically we're going to work a brewery for the rest of our lives. That's our retirement. Yeah.
What a job.
Now, granted, we'll hire some kids to do all the heavy lifting for us, but we're going to be running the place. And the whole point is we plan on having a minimum of 5 years operating expenses before we open. Because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for failure. So undercapitalization, the cost to get into this is number one. That's the number one thing. The number two thing, but just closely behind that right now, is the number two hurdle for non-alcoholic brewers is just the normalization of non-alcoholic beer in the United States market. If you go to Europe, non-alcoholic beer, there's no stigma to it, right? Here in America, somebody's like, oh, you're drinking non-alcoholic beer. What's the point? Well, the point is I like beer, not necessarily booze. Okay.
Yeah,
so you're drinking to get drunk. Congratulations. I'm not. So we have to get past that. And in Europe, they don't have that. In Europe, they've been using non-alcoholic beer a lot. And over in Europe, a big segment of their athletes don't drink Gatorade. After their workout, they'll have a non-alcoholic beer or two. And that's because you get a lot of the same things from sports drinks without all that extra sugar.
Yeah, and that's been a big thing with those drinks is all the sugar, and some of them even all the caffeine they shove into them.
And there's a lot of health benefits to drinking non-alcoholic beers. So first of all, you take all the alcohol out, so it's not a diuretic, right? It doesn't have any of the negative effects of the alcohol, and it's not going to give you a hangover because it's not dehydrating you. Okay, it actually helps with hydration. It's full of B vitamins and other minerals that are essential for the body. It promotes healthy sleep. There's all of these wonderful byproducts of drinking non-alcoholic beer. So that's the number two thing we have to get over in the United States is just that perception of, oh, you're drinking shitty non-alcoholic beer. Well, number one, non-alcoholic beer is good for you. And number two, it's not shitty anymore.
And I think that's a big stigma. I think for me, from my perspective, obviously you're way more smarter than I am on this. But I've just, over the years from people I've heard, and that's been the big thing, is the stigma of, oh, it's tasted like crap. And some of it has. Some of it's just been.
Oh, sure. And there are still, and look, I'll call out bad beer when I see it. I have and I've kind of annoyed some people in the community because there are some breweries out there that I have bought the beer and it has just tasted awful. And not just that it's been not good and like that I don't like it, right? Because there are good beer, like we talked about earlier. There are beers that can be well crafted. They're just not to my flavor. I'm talking about these are actual off flavors, detectable off flavors that have a specific cause that was a failure of the brewing process.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been very vocal about it when I've seen those beers and I've called them out. And I've, some people who are fans of those breweries have been very upset with me. And I said, look, I'm a brewer and we can't accept bad beer in the market because bad beer is going to hurt the industry. And eventually it's going to hurt that brewery because as competition stiffens and there are more non-alcoholic beer options and they get better and better, whatever market share they had, they are going to lose because people are going to choose good beer over bad beer every day.
Yeah. Like me, as I got older, when I was younger, we were all younger at one point, both being military people, When we were both in the military, we drank to get drunk. We've all been there, especially when we were younger. Now, as I get older, I could drink an alcoholic or non-alcoholic beer or other drinks, and I find myself now, the older I get, instead of getting drunk, I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the flavor, the experience of the drink I'm drinking, whether it be alcoholic or non-alcoholic. So I don't necessarily even want to get drunk anymore. I just want to enjoy it.
So this month, we're actually brewing the first beer that I will drink when I'm allowed to in March of next year. We are brewing a very big barley wine.
Nice.
It's probably going to be about a 14-15% beer.
Good God.
And, it's going to be a 4-hour boil. It's going to be a 35-pound grain bill. We actually have to split it into 2 mash tuns because our mash tuns aren't big enough.
You're going to be like, who's this butthole outside? Oh, that's a guy I did an interview a year ago with. He's just waiting out there for a drink.
So we're going to... So it's going to take, and we're going to let it age for a year because a good barley wine, you do let them age for 10 to 12, 15 months. Mm-hmm. So we're going to brew it out. It's going to be a 4-hour boil to reduce it down to the gravity we want it to. And we're going to let it ferment out and we're going to keg it and we're going to put a little bit of pressure on it. And we're just going to put it in our kegerator and we're going to date it and we're going to let it sit for a year. And then when I legally drink, I'm going to have one, just the one. I'm going to sit there with a snifter glass, and we're going to be in his backyard with his outdoor pizza kitchen and his outdoor fireplace. We're going to sit there with a cigar and a snifter of this barley wine, and I'm going to have the one. And then when I'm done with it, I'm going to switch to an NA beer, and we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon having a nice time. And then when I'm sober, I'm going to drive home.
I think, especially NA beers, somebody loves to take float trips. Mm-hmm. I live in Missouri. We have some of the finest rivers for float trips ever.
My homebrew
club, and they're cold as hell.
My homebrew club, we float to Guadalupe every August. We go the first weekend of every August. Trust me, it's just a
Where's
thing.
Where's that at?
The Guadalupe River that's down in the hill country of Texas, between like San Marcos, San Antonio, and
okay.
So it's fed. It's also spring fed out of Canyon Lake, and it's very cold. Unfortunately, by the time we get there in August, the river's a lot lower than we'd like it to be, but it's a thing. We can't change the weekend. It's the anniversary of the club. So, but we have a good time, and I will definitely be bringing NA beers going forward because you're out there all day. And by the time you get off that tube, if you've been drinking regular beer, you might not make it out of the river.
You're feeling it, and not always in a good way. And that's where I think definitely non-alcoholic beers would be very beneficial. If you're floating all day, whether you're sitting in a tube, kayak, whatever, I could probably do a non-alcoholic during the day, enjoy it, have fun with it. I'm not drunk. Then at night, if we're done floating for the night, we're going to camp overnight, then I can switch the alcoholic beer. That way I'm not dehydrated.
Absolutely.
That's always been the big thing where I've always had to drink a little beer, drink a little water. I would like to have something where I could drink it, not get drunk, still enjoy the flavor, which is
if you drink,
that would be beneficial.
If you were out camping and you drank, say, 2 non-alcoholic to every 1 alcoholic, I think you'd wake up in the next morning feeling right as rain.
Yeah, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds out of that.
Exactly.
You're getting your little bit of alcohol enough where you're getting a nice buzz, but not enough where you're hungover. You don't feel like trash. But you can still drink the non-alcoholic and a bunch of it.
And for any ladies in the audience, if you're pregnant, you can drink it. because there is so little alcohol in a non-alcoholic. But you're not. If you're worried about the minuscule amount that's in a non-alcoholic beer, you could always drink a alcohol-free beer. So like Suntory out of Japan is alcohol-free. Seria Brewing Company out of Colorado, who is the brainchild of Dr. Keith Villa, who is a brewing legend, who's been with Coors for 40 years. He was the founder and head brewer of Blue Moon Brewing. They have their own alcohol-free brand called Seria Brewing Company. So there's these alcohol-free ones you could drink if you're worried about the minuscule amount of alcohol in non-alcoholic beer. However, let me dissuade you right now of that concern. There is so little alcohol in a non-alcoholic beer. You would have to shotgun an entire 12-pack of non-alcoholic beer to get the alcohol that's in one Budweiser. Wow. And there's no way you can physically do that. You would literally drown yourself before you got the same amount of alcohol. On top of that, in one non-alcoholic beer, there is less alcohol than there is in a glass of orange juice, a can of tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce, or a hamburger bun. Because what's in a hamburger bun? You've got white bread, which has what? Sugar. You also have what? Yeast. You put sugar and yeast together, you're going to have alcohol. There's almost three times as much alcohol in a hamburger bun as there is in a non-alcoholic beer. So if you can drink OJ, if you can eat spaghetti and you can have a hamburger, you can drink a non-alcoholic beer.
That brings up another point. I think that's very beneficial to pregnant people because even with non-alcoholic beers, there's still that stigma with it. I think that I've noticed. And I think that would be good if we can get rid of that stigma. Even pregnant women, they can still enjoy they can enjoy that, still enjoy it with everybody else. But
and actually, I'm working on a special where I'm trying to find, I have an OBGYN that'll do it, but I'm trying to find a female OBGYN because I don't want two guys telling women, how to do it. It'll come off like Bill Burr's joke about, be like me writing a book, the third trimester and what to expect.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear that shit from a guy.
It'd probably be good. I agree with you. It'd probably be good if a woman OBGYN dealt with that.
But the reason why I want to have them on is because not only is it good during your pregnancy, but non-alcoholic beer is great for young mothers who are breastfeeding because beer yeast is very good and very beneficial towards the production of breast milk. And I know that's a weird topic to get on, but for the ladies out there, that is something you can do that's safe for you. You'll like the flavor of it, and it's actually a good thing for your body. So that's why I want to have a female OBGYN on to talk about it so it doesn't come off of, wow, this guy's a weird creeper.
I've said words. No, I think these are good things we definitely need to discuss. I think they're things that need to be public. I think there are things, especially OBGYNs, doctors, I think these are probably good things they could bring up with certain patients. I especially people that want to still participate without the alcohol, without getting drunk. And I think these are things that need to be talked about, and they're just not enough, in my opinion. A lot of it, like I say, I like alcoholic beer, but I think I like non-alcoholic too, if I can find a good one.
You know how much easier life would have been for my mother in 1978 had non-alcoholic beer been where it is now then, because in 1978, when my mom was pregnant with me, my mother had previously had 2 miscarriages, and my older sister, Kathleen, and I have another older brother, and another sister who are thankfully still with me. But my older sister, Kathleen, died at 9 months old. And then she had 2 more miscarriages before she got to me. And this is 1978. People were still drinking and smoking during pregnancy. And my mother asked the doctors, what can I do to ensure this baby goes full term? And the doctor said, quit smoking, quit drinking right now. So my mother quit both cold turkey. I don't know how she did it, but thank God she did, because I'm sitting here talking to you 44 years later. So if she had non-alcoholic beer she could have turned to, how much easier would that 9 months have been? Or non-alcoholic wine or non-alcoholic spirits or whatever you want to drink. But how much easier is that for people to be able to weed themselves off instead of just going cold turkey like she did? And thank God she was able to do that Herculean effort while, of all things, pregnant, which is just an ever-present, challenge for women. I mean, just the day in, day out grind of being pregnant for 9 months is an incredible challenge. So
and they have to miss out on a lot of stuff too.
Exactly. So if you had that, if you could have that one thing be a little bit easier, and then have that treat at the end of the day where I can have this and not feel guilty about it, what an uplifting thing that must be. You know,
I think that would, yeah, it'd be a very, I think for a lot of pregnant women, or let's say even people may be going in for, let's say, organ transplant because they're not allowed to have alcohol at all. Not supposed to.
Or post organ transplants,
exactly.
or just, you know, people who have conditions like diverticulitis,
yeah,
or you know, type 2 diabetes. They can't have the sugar.
Exactly.
So yeah, these are all things that people can turn to non-alcoholic beer for. It doesn't just have to be about I want to be sober, or I want to, you know, I want to moderate my drinking. There are all types of medical reasons why non-alcoholic beer is a great option for people.
Yeah, and I think that's a good, like I say, that's why I'm glad me and you are having this discussion today, because I think we're getting this information out there. It needs to be gotten out. You just don't hear enough people talking about it, in my opinion.
Sure. And I know my doctor absolutely loves the fact that I've switched to non-alcoholic beer, because my kidney and liver numbers were borderline. They weren't bad, but they weren't good either. And in the year or so that I've switched to non-alcoholic beer, my numbers have drastically corrected. It really doesn't take long. It only takes about a month, but I've been completely sober now for, well, let's find out. My last beer was on July 9th. So I have not had an alcoholic beverage in 211 days. So
nice. Because like I say, I drink, but like I say, I've cut way back because I got to the point where, you know, I was drinking. I started initially slow, which is how it does start. Mm-hmm. You know, we're just asleep, then it got heavier and heavier. Then I got to the point where it started creeping into my daytime life. And I went back, I'd say probably 2.5 months. I went from drinking very heavily, and I'll be honest about it, you know, which is why I wish there were non-alcoholic kind, if we had more options where I live anyway, you know. But I found that cutting back on the alcoholic drinks just in general, which I'm having one today because I've been good this week, I could tell the difference in how I feel. Oh, even my mental mood has improved. Mm-hmm. You know, I just find physically not drinking as much alcohol, which I still do, but not as much, which is why I'm glad we're having this discussion, because I do feel better, and I'm not going to sit there and say I don't. I'd be a liar if I said that.
Yeah. You know, alcohol
discussions are good.
Alcohol is great in moderation.
Exactly.
But that's the key word, is in moderation. And, you know, especially as we get older, we can't do. Oh God, you know, let me set the scene for
not
you
our
here.
Military days.
Oh God, this is where I'm going right now. So December 29th, 1999, Honolulu, Hawaii. We're a couple of days from Y2K, right? I turned 21 years old in Hawaii.
Oh.
I come off of a mid-watch. I I stay up till 6 o'clock in the morning off my mid-watch to wait for the Navy Exchange Mini Mart to open up. And I go buy my first case of legal beer, right? I bring that back to my barracks room. I take a 3-hour nap. I get up at 9 o'clock. I take the ferry from Ford Island over to Pearl Harbor to go to Navy Exchange, Navy Federal Credit Union to get some birthday checks cashed. Take the ferry. I have to wait for the ferry back. Stop at the enlisted club. Have a burger and a beer. Take the ferry back. My buddies are all waiting for me outside my barracks room. They take me to a liquor store and they buy me a bar's worth of booze for my birthday. Like literally, I had like 3 bottles of everything. Like I was mixing cocktails for other people on my floor in my dorm because there was no way I was going to drink all this, right? Even in my heyday. We go out that night. We party all night. We come back. It's like, because the last call in Hawaii is 03:45. So we drink straight till 4 in the morning, have breakfast somewhere, come back 6 o'clock in the morning. We're still drinking beer. I've been up for like 36 hours minus a 3-hour nap. I remember checking my email at my buddy Wild Bill Schmidt's barracks room, thinking to myself, gee, that keyboard's coming up really fast. Next night, another group of friends from another shift is off, and they want to take me out. That's December 30th. The next night is New Year's Eve.
Oh.
I went on a 3-day bender for my 21st birthday, concluding with New Year's Eve 2000 in Hawaii. Do you understand how nuts Hawaiians are for New Year's? Like, it's bigger than Christmas. It's bigger than 4th of July. It's the biggest holiday to Asian cultures. New Year's in the Asian culture is huge. And, granted, Hawaiian's Asian Pacific. But point being, there's a lot of Asians in Hawaii. Let me tell you something. So New Year's is insane. And, it was, by the way, I was at work the next day.
Oh, I've been there.
If I did that today, I'd have to call out sick for a week.
Oh, God, yes. Me too. I'll tell you my little story real quick. When I was in the military, when I turned 21, I was on duty. It fell on a weekday, so I had duty the next day. And guys are like, because we had a adult dance club outside a post. You know
what base doesn't?
Yeah.
Exactly. There's three things.
You got 10 tattoo parlors,
and shady car dealerships, strip clubs, fast food, and payday loan services.
Oh, in the military,
every base.
Yeah, in the military, as well as I do, all the new privates or even specialists.
Yeah, I got myself.
You get when you come in. What's the first thing after a couple? What's the first vehicle they get? A sports car. What do they do? Wreck them.
Ford Mustang. Dodge Charger, Camaro, whatever it is. Oh, and what was the interest rate you got on that? Only 27%.
Yeah, only 39. Really, hell of a deal. What do you see when you got somebody that's in 5, 6, 7 years pickup truck?
Yeah,
it's like I'm getting there and back. No, but when I went,
it's an old beat up pickup truck too. It's not even a new one.
My first sergeant took me out because we actually had. He was one of those first sergeants. He was all business on duty. When off duty, he was a first sergeant's. He was a soldier's first sergeant. He stuck up for his guys.
Yeah.
He's like, turn 21, Merkel. I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, we're going out. I was like, how much am I gonna need? He's like, I'll put it this way, you ain't gonna remember nothing. I didn't. I remember getting a Long Island iced tea.
Oh, Jesus.
Have this. And
nothing like starting with 6 shots of booze in one glass.
Yeah, and I was in E2 at this time. One of the specialists looks at me, another sergeant looked at me, and they just grinned. I was like, oh, no. And they're just laughing, so I knew it was going to be bad. Yeah. I remember then I don't remember anything after that. Apparently, I drank all night. It took me 2 weeks to get over the hangover. That's how much I drank on my 21st birthday in the military. 2 weeks it took me to get over it.
Yeah, it's insane in the military. I actually am very familiar with a lot of the Army culture because I was at a joint command. And we were a Navy command on an Army base. So go figure that one. Because we were actually...
like Fort Leonard Wood, they do MP and they also do 88 Mike, which is transportation. They train other branches there for both as well.
Well, we had so we were a Navy host command, but we were on an annex of Schofield Army Barracks. Mm-hmm. And actually, my only friend who's still on active duty, a great guy named Clark Cooling, Clark K, the Man of Steel, runs damn marathons for fun, that masochist. Anyway, he is the only guy I know still on active duty. He is a command sergeant major at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. He's an awesome dude, really looks out for his soldiers. I knew him when he was a lowly specialist who had just pinned on sergeant.
It was a good times. I drank a lot, probably more than I should have, but we all did.
Dude, so did the military.
In the barracks.
Yeah, dude, come on. I was in not only was I in Hawaii, I was in Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia, for those watching who don't know, is this tiny little island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's a British island. It's called a British Indian Ocean Territory. And there are outside of work, there are a couple things to do there. You can go fishing because they have MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, has fishing boats. And you can actually do some amazing fishing.
Wow, that'd be nice.
Tuna, wahoo, mahi-mahi, marlin, just amazing fishing, right? And then you can play sports, volleyball, softball, whatever. And then you drink at all of those things. The only place you didn't drink was work. I mean, it was insane, man. And then you had the British military there, and they, of course, they're renowned for their drinking prowess as well. We had Royal Navy Party 1017. Shout out to the Royal Marine Commandos that were my buddies over there. Crazy guys. I wanted to test how far it would go, though. So, me being very, very Irish, I got there, and the first thing I did was put up my Irish tricolor in my barracks window. It took about a half hour before I got a knock on the door, and I was like, that didn't take long. So I open up the door, and there's this Royal Marine Commando who's over there. It's their vacation tour. He's a ROPO, a Royal Overseas Police Officer. And he knocks over, and we open the door, and he's from Northern Ireland. And I hear this thick brogue say, matey, you've either got a brass set between your legs, or you're dumber than a box of fucking rocks. And I said, well, I got some Guinness in the fridge. And he goes, hey, brass pair it is then.
All right, let's drink. Yeah, I met a few when I was in, and we actually had some over 21 or 22 when it happened, and we had some over there training with us. It was like a joint training at the time, and we had a bunch of them were Irish,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I'm Irish German descent, so you know, drinking's in my blood. It just says,
yeah.
Oh, these guys,
I'm an Irish.
They drank us under the table.
I'm Irish. I'm Irish, just trained by German brewers. So there you go. And seriously too, like my professor in brewing school is a gentleman named Peter Butcher. Like I said, he's doctorate in brewing from Demens Brewing Institute in Munich, Germany. This guy has brewed all over the world. He's done brewery optimizations for InBev in Russia. He's opened breweries on 6 continents. I mean, the guy's brewing career has just been legendary. And then you've got my first boss in the brewing industry was a guy named Dennis Verman, who's from the Franconia region of Germany. And his family, he was in the family brewery from the time he was 6 years old. And as a matter of fact, the original logo of Franconia Brewing, before he sold it, we won't get into that because he didn't sell it to a big company, he sold it to another person, and that person, whatever. But the original logo of Franconia Brewing Company is actually a picture of his great-great-great-grandfather, Schaubert, who opened the family brewery in 1800. So, yeah, just some crazy brewing history that I've had the opportunity to learn from and be a part of.
Oh, man, we totally veered off here, didn't we? Good times. That's kind of how my channel goes. It's just all over the place now. But I love it that way. It makes it more fun, well, unpredictable, enjoyable.
Yep.
But I say let's get back on topic here.
Sure.
We got some new people that joined in.
Hello, new people.
Yep. Hey, Incoherent Turd. Yes, that's his name. Hello, Lemon. And
I've got to ask, Incoherent Turd, were you military? Because I just feel like somewhere along the line, a sergeant or a petty officer called you an incoherent turd, and it just stuck. Because that just doesn't that sound like something that a sergeant would call a private?
Yeah, exactly. Drill sergeant, especially going through.
Yeah, basic. Absolutely. That just,
douchebag Kylo, he lives up to his name.
Oh yeah, I know. Douchebag Kylo from DC's live streams. Absolutely. How you doing, sir? Cheers to you. Thanks for showing up and watching.
All right, back on topic now. Where were we on that?
Actually, I'm coming up on my 2-year membership on Doomcock's channel. I think that's either next week or the week after. I get my 2-year little symbol, the double eagle.
I've actually been watching him a little over a year, but I've been a paid subscriber for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very particular about who I give my money to.
Oh, absolutely.
And subscribe to. You get these people that are like, oh, watch me once, subscribe. No, I'm going to give you a few times before I do it. This is me.
Sure, 100%. And
everything, but back on topic, sorry. I know we both got off topic there, just sharing memories of good times.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a non-alcoholic beer, what is the growth rate with it? Just like with the non-alcoholic industry as a whole, what would you say be the growth rate or close to it?
Right now, exponential. And so I couldn't give you like a percentage, but I know this. Forbes put it this way: for a brewery, for a market that nobody really talked about 3 years ago, right? That's a fair statement, right?
Yeah.
Forbes estimates that the non-alcoholic beer market in North America, or not non-alcoholic beer, but the non-alcoholic spirits and beverage market in North America alone will be worth $23 billion a year by 2025. So you're talking exponential growth, at just as fast as the market can handle it. We're very much in the craft beer industry right now, or in the non-alcoholic beer industry. I would put it, compare it to the early 90s in the craft beer movement, where there's a lot of good beer out there. There's a lot of great beer out there, and there's a lot of beer out there of people that are just trying to jump on the bandwagon. And it really hasn't caught on yet, to where it's got a very dedicated base. It's got a very passionate base, but it hasn't caught on yet at bars and restaurants. I remember in the early 90s, it was very hard to find, because we didn't even call it craft beer then, right? We called it micro brews then.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was very hard to find micro brews at a bar. If there was a bar that had more than a couple micro brews on tap, it specialized in micro. That was their thing. You didn't go to a place like Buffalo Wild Wings and see 30 different taps. At a place like Buffalo Wild Wings or Chili's, they had maybe 10 taps, and they look like this: Guinness, Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light, Stella, Heineken.
Yep.
And that was it. Maybe you had something from England in there. Maybe you had a Bass Ale, something like that.
Some stuff from England's actually really good.
And then in the late 80s, early 90s, England makes phenomenal beer. Don't get me wrong. Germany, Belgium, England, Ireland, Scotland all make great beers. As a matter of fact, in 7 years, when we open up our brewery, we are going to focus on European beers, because we think that craft beer has kind of lost that in its identity. The craft beer nowadays is chasing trends. The fruited sours, the slushy beers, the pastry stouts. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, if it'll sell, great. But we just think that at least one little corner of the craft beer industry needs to get back to its roots. So we're going to open up a place called the Old World Ale and Lager House, and it's going to focus on Scottish, Irish, English, German, and Belgian beer, with a few American ones in there too. And then we're going to have European pub food to match.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. Because I know, like I say, with our local ball, like our baseball park, they're starting to sell a lot of craft beers now. Local ones. They're starting to they actually have different. I'll just use the term kiosk, even though it's not what they are.
But
they're actually they're bringing in more craft beers, and I think they're talking about bringing in more non-alcoholic too.
It would not surprise me, because I know Athletic. I want to say it's at one of the stadiums in Washington D.C. Whether it's, I don't know if it was the baseball or football stadium, or maybe it was even basketball. I don't know. But one of the stadiums out in the Washington area, they have an Athletic Brewing Company entire setup, like an entire bar that serves nothing but non-alcoholic in the stadium.
Yeah, because I know the one around here, they're talking about doing that, where they'll have like the strictly non-alcoholic beers, and I think they're talking about other non-alcoholic spirits too, which I think is good, especially for people, like I say, that don't drink but still want to enjoy the taste of wine or beer or other drinks and designated drivers. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and then the great thing about it too is when I say we're at the early 90s stage of where craft beer was in the early 90s, think of the non-alcoholic craft community as a microcosm of that, but also a very accelerated one, because we don't have to spend 30 years, 40 years. Because remember, craft beer really started in the early 80s. So we don't have to spend 40 years working our way into the community and getting people to change from just drinking your American lagers to drinking more flavorful, full-bodied beers. That work's already been done. So all we have to do is get you to say, hey, you can drink this and drive home sober.
I think one of the positives, especially with the NA, we'll use NA for this, non-alcoholic. I think one of the benefits compared to 80s, 90s, and maybe even the early 2000s is the internet. I think that is going to help to spread that awareness.
100%.
But I also think you got to have people willing to put the work in to do that.
Sure.
And I think and I've seen a lot of small breweries or craft breweries that they have a social media presence, especially if they're wanting to do non-alcoholic, but you can tell they don't put a lot of effort into it. And I think they need to step that up to get that out there so people know more about it.
Sure. And then there's, people on social media like myself. Like, I'm actually getting together next weekend with another gentleman in South Texas who he has a much larger channel than me. I just crossed 100 subs today. I'm actually already up to 107. I'm thinking some of your viewers have probably done that. So thank you guys.
Congratulations. I shared you, by the way.
Yes, I know, and I appreciate it very much. And I've been sharing you out as well. But like for the two gentlemen that I'm going to have on with me next week, and it's going to be recorded because I'm not ready to jump into the live stream, run a live stream myself yet. But we're going to record it. We're going to call it the Hangover Free Roundtable, and we're going to have a gentleman from down in South Texas his channel is called The Sober Barkeep, and I believe he has close to 2,700 subscribers. And then we're going across the pond to get our friend from All Hail the Ale, which is another beer channel. He reviews both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beers, but his focus has switched more towards non-alcoholic in recent days. And I think he has close to 700 subscribers. So there are those of us on YouTube who are trying to get the word out about non-alcoholic beer. And the reason why I wanted to get us all together is because I like hearing what they're seeing in their local areas, but also because, hey, high tides rise all boats, right? To steal a saying from my Navy days. So, cross-pollinate our audiences, get everybody, a couple more subscribers, help everybody out, and then get the word out about non-alcoholic beer and how good it really can be.
I think that's a really good thing, is definitely getting the information out there. And I think for a lot of, and like I say, I'll repeat myself on this, I've noticed a lot of the craft breweries at the time, early 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the different name for it. But I think is the lack of information on it and the lack of awareness.
Yeah.
But I think awareness needs to be put out more.
And with the internet too. I mean, look, strongest advertising was, and always will be word of mouth.
Yep.
You can have the best advertising in the world. You can have marketing people out the wazoo. But if people show up to your brewery and the beer sucks, everybody's going to know about it in 5 minutes. And that was true in 1980, and it's even more true now because of the internet. The internet, all the internet has done is amplify the voice of word of mouth advertising. So if you've got a good product and you know how to catalyze your local community and get them to spread the message about how good your beer is, you're going to blow up fast in your local community because that message is going to get out there quickly. Every little community has their own, different craft beer groups. On Facebook, there's one, DFW, Let's Talk Craft Beer. Now, I'm not a member of that group because there are some and I hate to use this word, but all right, I'm not going to use that word. It's the T word, ends with a C. It's used all over social media. You can figure it out for yourself. But I'm just going to say they're jerks in that group, okay? There are people that are know-it-all jerks that think they know everything about beer, and they talk down to people. They make fun of people. They make fun of breweries, and they really don't know a damn thing about what they're talking about, some of them. There's a lot of good people in that group, too, that are just there for beer information. But the point is, it's a very big group with a wide audience, and if they talk up your beer, your brewery is golden in Dallas-Fort Worth. You're going to have a crowd at your brewery the next weekend if that beer gets talked up inside that group. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I think word of mouth is probably the most important thing. Don't get me wrong, the information age, I think it's very important. It's very beneficial. It can be very negative, too. Like I say, like you were describing with that. But yeah, I definitely would agree that word of mouth is probably the best thing because you're getting a bunch of people that have legitimately tried something and like it or don't like it. Anybody can put anything they want on the internet. They can.
The only thing you have to do about internet and people talking about beer or any product on the internet is consider the source. If somebody's railing about a product and just telling you how terrible it is, and let's say you're on Yelp, look at all their other reviews. If all of their reviews are just complaining about bad products, well, maybe don't take their word with, as gospel. Maybe take it with a grain of salt. But if they have 100 reviews and 5 of them are bad, okay, now that's somebody maybe you should listen to because they're actually giving praise as well as, and more often than they're saying that this stinks, and maybe there's a reason why they're saying it stinks.
Yeah, because I've found that with, regardless of what the review may be, whether it be TV, beer, whatever, it can, it's the whole gambit. I found that I tend to listen to more people if they have like a 50-50 roughly, 50-50 they like, 50-50 they don't like, whatever it may be. I tend to listen to them more than the people that want to trash everything. Because I find the people that want to trash legitimately everything, and not in all cases, and I want to make that clear, tend to have an agenda. Sometimes.
Or they're grifting off of grief. Right? Like they're trying to pull the heartstrings. They're trying to get people mad because when people get mad, they talk. And when they talk more, they're talking about your channel. And so when they're talking about your channel gets out there more. And I try to, even when I have a beer that I review that I don't like, I try not to go too overboard on the dislike. And there is, like I said, there's one brewery that I really don't care for, and I'm not just going to throw them under the bus here because I've contacted them privately. I've contacted them privately, and I've already made my feelings about this brewery known in the different non-alcoholic beer groups. Supposedly, they have been making strides to make their beer better, and I will give them another opportunity. This will be a third opportunity at this point. But that's going to be a little ways off because of a couple things. Number one, I've already given them 2 chances, and there's a lot of NA breweries out there that I haven't gotten to yet, and I want to get to those first before I circle back. It's only fair. But second, if they are refining their process, but they haven't quite gotten it yet, I'm going to give them as much of a chance as they can. So probably later this year or early next year, I am going to circle back to that brewery, and we're going to see how far they've come. And if they have come a long way, I'm going to give them all the praise in the world.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there should always be room for to let a company improve and earn praise again. I think that's a good thing, and I think that's how it should be. They should have a chance to redeem themselves. And
look, I don't want to sit there and call. I really don't like calling out bad beer. I mean, I'll do it because it's the right thing to do. But I want you to make good beer because it's better for the market. It's better for your employees. I want the market to be a strong, healthy environment with good beer that everybody enjoys, and you be able to pay your employees a good salary. And I don't want to see them going out of a job. So I don't want to see you going out of business. I want people to succeed. I am rooting for these breweries to succeed, even if I don't like their current efforts.
Yeah, and competition's good. Competition tends to breed better product.
100%.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it's lacked in some spaces is the lack of competition in certain areas. I'm not saying all areas. You have some areas where you have a lot of competition, others where you have 1 or 2. So there's no incentive to improve the product that they're making.
I'll give you a great example. And it's kind of a funny one. And maybe some people like it, maybe most people don't, but who cares? Professional wrestling. Professional wrestling in the late 90s, early 2000s, when you were having the Monday Night Wars between Monday Night Nitro and Monday Night Raw, it was phenomenal TV. And yes, I know it's scripted. It's not real. It's a male soap opera, 100%. But you know what we were doing in 2001 in the barracks right after 9/11? On Monday nights, we would bring a second TV into the common room. We had a cable splitter in there, and we'd have Raw on one TV and Nitro on the other TV. And we'd all be sitting there with burgers or pizza and beer, and there'd be sailors, Marines, Army, everybody in that barracks room. And we'd be sitting there watching. Whichever had the better match had the volume, right? We would constantly be switching the volume depending on who had the better match. And we'd be going nuts, having a great time. Then the worst thing that could have ever happened to wrestling was Vince McMahon buying WCW. Wrestling's been on a downward trajectory, in my opinion, ever since.
It has. It's not what it used to be. Like he did buy WCW, but he bought Turner Network.
Yeah.
Because there was a thing, it was just something I read, that apparently Turner, when he wrote his book, when WCW was still around, when they were still having the wars, Turner actually said he came in one day to work, realized he didn't run his own company anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when it started all going downhill, and they bought it. But yeah, the worst thing they could have done was getting rid of WCW. It ruined it.
As Robin Williams once said about Ted Turner's, Ted Turner and Jane Fonda broke up. Jane found God, and Ted found out it wasn't him.
Yep, that was it. But yeah, I remember those days being in the military. We did the same thing. We'd watch WCW, and I won't call it WWE. I still call it WWF.
Yep.
And people try to correct me. I'm like, no, it's WWF. But yeah, we did the same thing. We had a blast doing that. Drank some beers. We had a good time, and that was fun. Yeah, now it's just garbage. It's just it's not good anymore.
Nope.
There's no competition.
Well, and they're trying there's a new competition to WWE out there, and I hear they're trying, but I'm so far removed from the days that I cared about it that it's just I'm like, it's great for people who still watch it and still love it that there is new competition, and I do appreciate that, but I'm so far removed from those days that I'm just like, I don't have time for it anymore.
Yeah, if he'd have been smart, he would have kept WCW around, and still he'd owned them both. He'd have been making twice the money. Let's be honest, because WCW was popular. He should have ran them both separately. Still had them compete against each other, but he'd have been making twice the money.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's just competition. But that, and there it goes. Competition breeds better product for the consumer. So.
Oh yeah, sorry. Incoherent Turd says something. Wait, can you guys elaborate on that? Vince owned TNT. Yeah, he bought the whole network. It wasn't just WCW.
See, I wasn't aware of that. I just thought
he bought the whole thing, and which WCW came along with it, and then he axed it and did the whole invasion stuff, which was just a failure.
Yeah.
Some of the guys that went there though from WCW did well. I think the Giant did good.
And
Ric
Booker
Flair
T
was there
had
for a little bit, but a lot of them were bouncing.
Booker T had some early success in WWF.
He did good. Then a lot of them went to TNA. Then they went to Impact and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I know Sting's still involved in it, but he's more like a coach and stuff with one of the smaller groups. All right. Anything else you want to go into on the beers front, or?
Not unless anybody has any questions. But yeah, I mean, if you
let's see.
If you, I will say this: if you ever want to get into brewing, I'll be happy to answer anybody's questions on how to do that. I would recommend reaching out to your local homebrew store in your area. If they're anything like my local homebrew stores, they will be happy to sit and talk beer with you and answer all your questions. You can spend as much or as little as you want to get into homebrewing beer. And any questions you have, you can reach out to me. You can find me at the Brewing Sailor on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm at Brewing Sailor on Twitter. And of course, my channel, The Brewing Sailor, on YouTube. And you can reach out to me directly via email at thebrewingsailor@gmail.com.
Awesome. If anybody in the audience has any questions, go ahead and feel free to ask them, and they'll answer any questions about that.
Yeah, so 15 years ago, I didn't even know you could brew beer at home. A friend of mine, my good Navy buddy of mine, Adam Villarreal, we were best friends in Hawaii. We've known each other for 20-something years. He was my best man. I was his best man. He comes into my apartment one day. He goes, dude, check this out. He brings up a website called Homebrew Headquarters. And I was like, oh, cool. We can order stuff and brew it at home. He goes, no, dude, the store's like 3 miles away. And I'm like, well, then why the hell are we not in the car?
Yeah, we have one or two of those.
That's how we started. Sadly, Homebrew Headquarters, after 30-something years, shut down. It was a COVID casualty. But North Texas Homebrew Supply has opened up to fill the void. And so I'm very happy that if you live in the North Texas area and you're watching, North Texas Homebrew Supply is a fantastic homebrew supply store. They do a great job. And as a matter of fact, I have to get my ass down there in the near future because my homebrew club has one of our 2 big annual events coming up in April. It's the Drunken Bunny Brunch. And my brew team, we have 3 beers to brew. So we're going to do a double batch of our Rice Lager, our Rice Krispy Boy. Nice. We're doing our Belgian Saison because it's a nice table beer, good springy, low alcohol brunch beer. We're going to do a golden milk stout, a coffee golden stout, which is a good breakfast beer. And then we're going to do the non-alcoholic IPA. So
nice. You guys aren't going to have any pumpkin spice anything, are you?
No, and if we did, that would be later in the year. And honestly, the big problem with pumpkin spice beers, in my opinion, are twofold. Number one, people go way too heavy on the spice. Nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, ginger, these are very potent spices. You do not need a lot of them. Well, a tiny pinch will do.
I've heard that.
The other problem I have with most pumpkin beers is they are just pumpkin spice beers. They're not pumpkin beers. One of my favorite pumpkin beers of all time was Fat Jack from Samuel Adams because they had something like 60 pounds of pumpkin meat per batch in the mash. And so you got actual pumpkin flavor along with the spices. And it was a great beer. They don't make it anymore, sadly. Or if they do, you can only get it up in New England. But yeah, it's one of their regional beers. But man, it was fantastic. I loved that beer. But yeah, most pumpkin beers I'm out on just because they're pumpkin spice and not real pumpkin. I want a pumpkin beer. So that's just my taste.
I've tried different pumpkin stuff, and I'm with you. You don't taste any pumpkin. You just taste the spice. It's like,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense. But you got them people that flock to it.
Well, I mean, come on.
They put on their space boots and their leggings, and
yeah, there you go. So
unless anybody has any questions, we will end this interview. If you want to go ahead and shout out your YouTube channel one more time and your Twitter one more time.
So I'm on YouTube. You can just search The Brewing Sailor, at Instagram and on Facebook at The Brewing Sailor, and on Twitter at Brewing Sailor. I couldn't put The Brewing Sailor because it was too long for Twitter, so just at Brewing Sailor on Twitter. I put up new reviews every Friday. We have some monthly specials coming out, from hangover-free cocktails to hangover-free roundtable. And we'll be branching out and doing some other things. In March, we're doing Macro March Madness in addition to my normal reviews. So in consecutive weeks in March, we're going to review Bud Zero, then Miller Sharps, then Coors Edge. And then at the end of March, we're going to do a blind taste test and see that if we remove all of my prejudices of who brews what, do I score them in the same place? So that's going to be interesting. And then in April, we're going to switch it up a little bit. Instead of just doing 1 beer a week from a brewery, we're going to do 3 beers a week from the brewery. And we're going to do a rapid review on Monday and Wednesday, and then a full review on Friday. That's going to take my favorite beer of the 3, and we'll do a full review on that. And then we're going to give you an overall grade on the brewery itself. So lots coming up, lots of changes. We're growing, we're expanding, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Excellent. I love to hear it. Do you have any quick recommendations for websites people can go to look more into this as well?
Sure thing, I do. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can find the. I want to see if I can find that brewing page. So if you're interested in, there's plenty of brewing, home brewing websites out there. If you just Google that, you'll find those. If you're interested in brewing some low or no alcohol beer, there's ultralowbrewing.com is a great reference. And then if you want to try some of the best non-alcoholic beers out there, if you want my current recommendations, Athletic Brewing Company, you're going to be able to find anywhere. So that's an easy one to get into. That's a real easy one to dive into. Rationale Brewing, my sponsor out of California. They have some great IPAs and a fantastic Mexican lager. Woodland Farms Brewing out of Maine does amazing things. They're really, really good. Self-Care Brewing is really good. And then Two Roots Brewing is fantastic. I'm in the middle of reviewing their beers. I just did their Resin Riot on Friday. I'm doing their Passion Fruit Pucker next Friday, and their New West IPA the following Friday. And the nice thing about Two Roots is if you buy 2 6-packs or more, you get free shipping. So that kind of mitigates the cost of having to ship the beer rather than just buying it off of your local store. So those would be the breweries that, if you want to dive into non-alcoholic beer and get a taste of what's good, those would be the ones to do it from.
I'd say at a later date if you'd like, especially since you can have non-alcoholic beer shift. Maybe do a collab later down the line, and I could order some beers that you were recommending. We could do a live taste testing and discussion on what we think at a later date, if you wouldn't mind doing that at some point.
I'd love to come back and do that. That'd be fantastic.
I think that'd be a good time. And we can taste different non-alcoholic beers and discuss it and go over it with the people watching. And
I'll tell you what, you tell me what style of beers you like best, and I will curate a little lineup for you, and we will figure it out. How's that?
Definitely. That sounds great. I would love to do that if everybody here would like to see that, and I'm pretty sure they would because they're enjoying some variety and topic, which is my channel. So I'm trying to do. But hey, I'd like to say thank you for coming on. Seriously, I had a really good time. Very informative, learned a lot more than I thought I would learn from it, honestly.
Oh, the only thing that's stopping me from going on and talking more about beer is the fact that I've had 3 and I really have to pee.
Oh, I guess I'm getting to that point too. My bladder's starting to call. But again, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service to the military.
And to yours, man. Hey, appreciate you, brother.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for coming on, having this good discussion. We got in some really good detail. I really enjoyed that. I look forward to some future collaboration, some taste testing live for the fans. And maybe if we can do this ahead of time, we can say, hey, here's what we're going to test. Maybe we could let the fans know, and they could order some and have it. They can join in with us, and they can sit there at home and
absolutely
with us. I think it'd be a good time.
Be happy to do that.
But hey, good to have you. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here on Drinks and Opinions. Hope you enjoyed our guest, the Brewing Sailor. We will catch you guys next time on the flip side for the next show, and I will let you know in the future what the topic will be. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks, Lemon. Thank you, Stephen Ransom. Thank you, Incoherent Turd. Thanks to everybody that has come tonight. Y'all have a great night. Bye.